NFL games this weekend. We also have 6, Dan Graziano, head coaching openings in the NFL. Let's run through those.
Why you're asking me with Tannenbaum? Anyway, we got the Bears. Let's talk about the Bears. Mike McCarthy was in there earlier this week, former Cowboys coach. Bears flew him in, interviewed him in person. He stayed overnight. A legitimate candidate there in Chicago. They are interviewing a lot of people, but the fact that he was able to get in front of them and be there in person, I think you have to stamp him as a legitimate candidate for the job. We'll keep an eye on that. Still in its early stages is the Bears coaching search. Not as early as the Cowboys. I'm sorry, we got the Raiders. The Raiders have been talking to Lions offensive coordinator Ben Johnson. He's high on their list of candidates from what I've been told. Tom Brady, you see here, he's a minority owner in the Raiders. He's been involved in the interview process. He is said to be a big fan of Ben Johnson and trying to push hard to see if they can make that hire happen. They're also looking for a general manager in Las Vegas, but keep an eye on Ben Johnson if you're wondering where he may end up. The Raiders, a legitimate possibility. And then there is the Dallas Cowboys. We know this is Deion Sanders. Jerry Jones talked to Deion Sanders earlier this week about possibly coaching the Cowboys. Where that ends up is really anybody's guess at this point. They are interviewing Kellen Moore, the Eagles offensive coordinator, virtually today. They have an interview set up this weekend with former Jets head coach Robert Saleh. Leslie Frazier is on their list. Liam Cohen is on their list. But Greeny, I know you want to talk about this guy, Deion Sanders, who is apparently on the list as far as Jerry Jones is concerned, and we'll see where that ends up.
I want to hear Stephen A. talk about it. Yesterday, Stephen A., for those of you who missed it, opened First Take with a message for Jerry Jones.
Howdy! How do you do? Yes, I'm in someplace other than Dallas, Texas, but it's on a lot of people's minds because I heard my boy Prime Time is snowmobiling in the mountains. Let me tell you something, baby. It don't matter whether you got on a cowboy hat, whether you're snowboarding, or whatever the case may be. When Prime Time is making news and it's associated with the Dallas Cowboys, you know what you got to say to yourself? Come on, Jerry, get it together. The playoffs are going on without you. Come on, Jerry, you know you need a new man in that building. Get it together. Come on, Jerry, do what the people are clamoring for you to do, because when you do that, you can end up someplace like this, even with a cowboy hat on, you hear?
Okay, Stephen A., performance arts extraordinaire. So there's so many pieces to this. And the most interesting one of it, and Mike Tannenbaum, all kidding aside, I mean, anyone who's paying attention is aware you're assisting the Jets with their head coaching search. At the end of the day, these things come down to one person making a decision, right? So it's not about whether we think it makes sense, all that kind of stuff. It's going to come down to Jerry Jones deciding does he like the idea or not.
It's not about whether anyone else in the Dallas Cowboys facility thinks it makes sense. It's up to Jerry Jones. Look, I continue to think this is not the likely outcome, right? Like a lot has to happen. Deion at Colorado, you know, he's got some roots down there and has done well. But the fact that they've talked is not insignificant. It is Jerry that's going to make this decision. He could theoretically sell Deion on this opportunity and get him out of Colorado. So the thing people have to understand is if you go back a week and you ask Jerry Jones who the coach of the Cowboys is going to be next year, he would have said Mike McCarthy. Like this, they thought they would get a deal done with McCarthy. They didn't. So their search couldn't begin until early this week, and as of now, this is part of it.
Yeah, I agree. This time of year, you hear words like fit and alignment. It's very unique there. It's an owner who's a GM who has a post-game press conference, a radio hit every week. So it has to be a fit for that culture and that situation. In some ways, you feel like these two guys would fit together, and if it's ever going to happen, now would be the time.
I mean, this would be strictly a football. This isn't about selling tickets or back pages. Deion Sanders is a legitimate football coach who has proven himself at everything he's ever done.
You know him. I mean,
he was a teammate of mine for 2 years. Listen, people don't get confused with thinking Deion is like, some new school type of guy. He's an old school principal guy. And what does the Dallas Cowboys need? Accountability. They've been living off of those 3 titles that they had in the 90s. Well, who better to come in than a guy that was part of that building process to help them get one of them chips? He can come in, and he's one of the very few players that can get the ear of the audience, and he can call guys out. And what could you say? If you want to build brands, that's who you talk to. He can be a resource for everybody in that locker room and everybody within that building.
Well, I think it's 2 different jobs that head coaches in Dallas have to do. You have to be able to manage the locker room, and you have to be able to manage the owner. And I think that Deion Sanders can do that. It's not necessarily just about the X's and O's. Obviously, he knows and understands how to build a program when you look at Jackson State and also Colorado. But for Jerry Jones and Deion, it's having a voice that you value and respect. Someone needs to be able to have a conversation with Jerry, because you're never going to tell Jerry what to do. That, Jerry, this could be best for our team, and have him value that. And now when you look at a CeeDee Lamb, go back to last year with Dan and we're talking about the tours. Who better to say, okay, here is how you handle what it is to be a Dallas Cowboy better than primetime Deion Sanders?
Right.
The thing about these 2 men, There's no room that Deion Sanders is in where he's not the brightest light. There's no room that Jerry Jones is in where he's not the brightest light. How do they figure out a way to compromise when it comes to who is the biggest voice in this locker room? And I think that's what's most important.
I think the other part of this, you just made me think of it. You know, Micah Parsons with all the podcasts. I mean, the Cowboys have far more podcasts than they have wins, you know, in this past year anyway. Like, I think that's the kind of thing, to your point, that Deion might be the one player or one of a very small handful of people who could walk into a room and say, guys, we're done with that.
No, he can't. Deion has a Tubi show right now. So, like, that's not going to happen. But the thing is, the thing that he won't do, though, he won't tell them not to have them, but he will tell them, do your job with excellence while having them. There's so many. This is a new age of players.
He probably can help him do it.
Yeah, it's a new age of players. So now.
You remember the days of Dez Bryant, right? Back when the Cowboys had a true alpha at wide receiver. But after moving on from Dez, this team made a mistake that still haunts them, trying to win with a WR by committee approach. Cole Beasley, Terrence Williams, Deonte Thompson. None of them were 1S, and let's be honest, it was painful to watch. It didn't take long for the Cowboys to realize their mistake. That's why they went all in on Amari Cooper, trading a first-round pick to the Raiders. Then they doubled down, drafting CeeDee Lamb in the first round of 2020. For a while, it felt like the problem was finally solved. But now, we're back to square one. So here's the question: should the Cowboys have stuck with Amari? Or did they make the right call letting him go? Drop your take in the comments, and let's settle this debate. If there's one thing the Cowboys got right, it's CeeDee Lamb. He's not just WR1 in Dallas, he's one of the best in the entire NFL. And after the season he just had, you could argue he's the best. Think about it, Lamb dominated despite everything going wrong around him. Dak Prescott went down with a season-ending injury. Lamb himself battled a brutal shoulder injury. And yet, he still broke records, made history, and even passed Jerry Rice on an all-time list. That's legendary status. At this point, there's no debate CeeDee is elite. But here's where things get tricky. Outside of him, the Cowboys' WR room is a big question mark. Brandon Cooks was supposed to be the perfect WR2, but that didn't exactly work out. And now, the Cowboys are staring at an uncertain future behind their superstar. So let's settle this: where do you rank CeeDee Lamb among the NFL's top WRs? Is he the best? Drop your rankings in the comments. This was supposed to be a dangerous duo, CeeDee Lamb and Brandon Cooks, a perfect WR1 WR2 combo. But let's be real, it didn't turn out that way. Cooks battled injuries, missing weeks due to a knee infection, and when he was on the field, he never became the dominant complement to Lamb that we expected. Sure, there were flashes of his elite speed, but overall, it just wasn't enough. And now, the Cowboys have a tough decision to make. Do they stick with Cooks, or do they move on? Meanwhile, the rest of the WR room was a mixed bag. Jalen Tolbert took steps forward, Jalen Brooks showed some promise, and Jonathan Mingo arrived via trade. But are any of these guys really ready to be the WR2? That's the real question. So tell me, should the Cowboys keep Cooks, or is it time to let him go? Vote in the poll and let's see where the fan base stands. One thing is clear: the Cowboys are leaning toward a youth movement at wide receiver. And honestly, that might be the right call. Jalen Tolbert has shown flashes, and with more opportunities, he could take a big step forward. Jonathan Mingo is an intriguing addition, and since Dallas gave up a 4th-round pick for him, he's almost guaranteed a spot. Then there's Jalen Brooks, Ryan Flournoy, and even Kavonte Turpin, who proved he can be more than just a return specialist. But let's be real, none of these guys are guaranteed to be the answer. That's why the NFL draft and free agency could be huge for Dallas. Will they bring in a veteran WR, or will they roll the dice on a rookie? What do you think? Should the Cowboys sign a free agent WR, draft one, or trust the guys they have? Drop your thoughts in the comments. So where do the Cowboys go from here? The WR room is filled with potential, but potential alone won't win games. If Dallas wants to take the next step, they need a clear plan. First, they have to decide on Brandon Cooks. Keeping him means betting on a bounce-back year, while moving on would free up space for a younger WR. Second, they need to develop the guys they already have. Tolbert, Mingo, and Brooks need real opportunities. And finally, they have to be smart in free agency and the draft. One more dynamic WR could change everything. This is a crucial offseason for the Cowboys. Will they get it right? Or will they end up back in the same cycle of WR uncertainty? Now, it's your turn. Who do you want to see in the Cowboys WR room next season? Free agents, draft prospects, or just trust the young guys? Let's talk in the comments.